will perform a Tibetan song of gratitude today. It is supporters like you who have helped groups like Chaksamba, Simshipunda, Tanks Dance Troupe, the Kids for Tibet, preserve and promote Tibetan cultural heritage in the Bay Area. Among the other groups that were born here in the Bay Area in the 1980s and 90s was the International Committee of Lawyers for Tibet, now known as the Tibet Justice Center, which advocates for the Tibetan people's right to self-determination. TJC's lawyers assist the Tibetan government in exile in setting up an advocacy office in the United Nations in Geneva, which is very functional to this day. TJC advised many Tibetan delegations to the United Nations and other international conferences, most notably the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995, where China's repression of Tibetans captured the international news media. TJC's legal analysis and reports on China's violation of human rights in Tibet have been invaluable use in our ability to present our case to lawmakers worldwide. We thank early founding members of ICLT, Kim Morris, Eva Herzer, and TJC leaders John Meyer, Dennis Cusack, and Chris McKenna, who have helped strengthen the legal arguments for Tibetans' rights to self-determination and human rights. Today, TJC is campaigning to highlight the environmental impacts of China's policies on traditional nomadic lifestyle. During the same period here in the Bay Area, young people and students founded Milarepa, which mobilized young people for Tibet through huge concerts where Tibetan monks and top-rung bands shared the stage and engaged youth for Tibet. We send our gratitude to Erin Potts, who actually might be here or would be here soon, and Adam York for their leadership and vision. Some of the Milarepa people were instrumental in founding Students for a Free Tibet, which has revolutionized the way Tibetans engage in activism. SFT has mobilized student organizations on campuses all over the world. SFT, now headquartered in New York and directed by a Tibetan, grew to be one of the most powerful and effective Tibetan support groups today, which last year focused the world's attention on Tibet during the Beijing Olympics through amazing actions over the Golden Gate Bridge locally and over the Bird's Nest in Beijing. Supporting Tibetan nuns, the Tibetan Nuns Project started to raise funds for very successful new initiatives for nunneries in India. The Committee of 100 for Tibet gathered prominent leaders into an advocacy group for Tibet and organized a powerful collective tapestry of installations called the Missing Peace Project, which is currently traveling throughout the United States and the world, I might add. Inspired by His Holiness the Dalai Lama's vision for peace, the exhibition illustrates 88 ways to think about, talk about, and cultivate peace. We thank Darlene Markovich and her team for all their efforts to foster peace through art, as we hope the Tibetan memorial quilts displayed here in this hall today will do so in the future. More recently, the Dalai Lama Foundation came to life, connecting Tibet to many nonviolent causes around the globe and educating children and adults alike on matters of peace and compassion. Many of you who support and who were part of founding the Dalai Lama Foundation are sitting here today, and we thank you very much for starting that. These organizations would not have come into life without you, each one of you. We thank you for all your efforts and time away from your families, for your willingness to speak up for human rights in Tibet. We deeply appreciate your work for our people's freedom and your understanding of how our nonviolent struggle is connected to your vision of a nonviolent and a more compassionate world. Throughout our time here, you offered us your friendship and generous, practical, and moral support. For all that, we are deeply grateful and thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Many politicians, such as those I mentioned earlier, and human rights organizations have supported the Tibetan community in the Bay Area and the greater cause of Tibet, for which we are most indebted. Some of those politicians are represented, and we seek your help in gaining more support for Tibet in this Obama era, particularly in the wake of President Obama's upcoming visit to China. Very few tank events end without recognizing the consistent and committed support of Berkeley Council member Chris Worthington. Chris, you have always been there for Tank and our community. Thank you ever so much. Our thank you would not be complete without remembering a person who is sadly no longer with us, the late Congressman Tom Lantos. Congressman Tom Lantos spearheaded the political support for Tibet and His Holiness the Dalai Lama in the US Congress and led the effort for award of the US Congressional Gold Medal to His Holiness in 2007. We are most indebted to him for his effective leadership in Congress on behalf of Tibet. Yet, while we celebrate generosity today, we must not lose sight of our brothers and sisters inside Tibet who are far less fortunate than we are. They continue to live in fear, as you will see later this afternoon in daring documentary Leaving Fear Behind by filmmaker Thundup Wangchen, who continues to be imprisoned by the Chinese authorities for documenting the truth behind the propaganda. Copies of the New York Times article that was posted yesterday by Andrew Jacobs called "The Tibetan Filmmaker Tried for Subversion" are available at our information desk, so please help yourself. I would highly recommend reading that. The film speaks for itself and clearly demonstrates the true condition and spirit of Tibetans inside Tibet under the occupation of China. We hope that everyone in this room will be inspired to seek the release of Thundup Wangchen and Tibetan political prisoners like him before the worst happens, as it did last week for 4 Tibetans. On October 20th, Lobsang Gyaltsen, Loyak, Penki, and an unnamed Tibetan were executed under the supervision of the Lhasa Municipality Intermediate People's Court for their alleged involvement in last year's mass protests in the Tibetan capital. State media early reported that the Tibetans, quote unquote, have to be executed to assuage the people's anger, close quote. Such eyeball for eyeball approach is in no way a justification for giving the death penalty. The Tibetan community organized candlelight vigil, and last Friday we organized a protest in front of the Chinese embassy that was well attended by Tibetans and a few supporters. We can all guess why China is getting away with actions such as those used on since March 2008 demonstrations across the Tibetan plateau. The global Tibetan movement is faced with a Goliath that is gaining strength by the day, particularly in the wake of the global economic crisis. Yet, despite China's power and its ill-advised strategy for Tibet, we Tibetans are hopeful that change in China is inevitable and Tibetans will never give up. We are committed to keep our culture and our cause alive, and at the forefront of international discussions, to engage in dialogue with Chinese citizens and to become agents of change. To do this, we need your continued and active support more than ever, and as we hold candlelight vigils, protests, as we work to engage politicians and nonprofit organizations, and as we reach out to our Chinese brothers and sisters. The more we all speak up, we, the Tibetan, are not just seen as a small group of disgruntled people, but as a growing movement for human rights and the rule of law, which has visible, widespread support. The more our struggle for human rights and self-determination will succeed.